One thing that I want to highlight on that I don't think can be able to help, and Larry touched on it lightly, is you are correct, Larry. We've been nice, to say the least, about the performance of this offensive line. We've been nice. But Monday was just flat out abysmal. John Feliciano had a horrible day. Spencer Burford had an even worse day. Colton McKivitz was getting stonewalled by big skill and flat out skill players in linebackers and corners, right? He was getting washed back inside, stonewalled at the point of attack in inside zone, outran on outside zone. There are a couple of plays where Brock had to get the ball out with Jake Brindle sitting in his lap multiple times. And this wasn't with great players. We're talking about, I like Matabuke, but Washington, some of their fringe guys, they were doing this to our offensive linemen, not world beaters, right? A lot of fringe depth guys were having this type of success against our offensive line. Also, a couple of things that I wanted to talk about with the Ravens. This is the only team, in my opinion, outside of the Cleveland Browns that plays as fast, as physical, as smart, and they're as conditioned of a defense that we're going to see. These boys, we were tired on offense, and they had more in the tank for us. There was just a different type of feel on what they were doing. I mean, even on I believe that was the fourth pick, by Kyle Hamilton's second pick, he was blocked on that play thoroughly, got back up, got back in the plaster, and got himself a pick. These boys they were outplaying us one-on-one. They didn't really care about the scheme because I feel as though their coaches handled that. One thing about the offensive line is that I feel like the Ravens used a lot of sim pressure looks up front, simulated pressure, where there were times where, quite frankly, our protections up front were not mirrored with the pressure that we were seeing. There was a lot of times where we were sliding to the wrong side. There were times where they would overload with 3 on one side and maybe have Roquan Smith on the outside by himself, and they would tilt, and you would have 4 linemen blocking two defensive linemen. Or they would loop pressure and sometimes bring Kyle Hamilton on the outside. You'd have 3 linemen blocking 1 defensive lineman. They did a very good job at putting stress on our offensive line. They made our offensive line play 4 quarters. They didn't just let themselves get blocked. There are plays where you could tell that the tempo of the game was a little too much for our offensive line, so much so that you started seeing mental errors. There's one play where Aaron Banks clearly went in the wrong direction of an entire play. I think that was the first run play of the game, where Christian McCaffrey went for 12 yards. The reason why he went for 12 yards is because Aaron Banks went in the wrong direction and created an entire canyon for Christian to just go right behind him, because it was just created a car wreck in the middle of the field. These boys got outplayed up front. I don't feel bad about the performance that I saw out of our skill guys, but I feel like what beat us, and the reason why we can talk about the yards and what the skill guys did, is because Kyle does such a good job at engineering around this offensive line with leverage, with running hard to the left side. If he runs to the right side, he makes sure that it screens, that the ball gets out quickly. He uses a lot of long extended handoffs, if you will, with a lot of now routes on the right side. He does a lot of creative things over there to get Spencer and Colton out in space so they can block smaller defenders. But the Ravens weren't having it. They played our offensive line and they made them deal with us. And in my opinion, that was the biggest problem up front. I mean, for our offense, is that it wasn't the fact that Kyle, I started out when we lost this game really upset with our lack of running the ball. Like, why weren't we running the ball? This is our identity. But once you run back the tape, we couldn't run the ball unless we dedicated ourselves to a black and blue game. Like, if we were going to really get beat up, that's what we would have been, running the ball, because we didn't even run the ball that much, and our offensive line couldn't even handle this game.
I didn't think that 49er offensive line is barely good enough at full strength. And in this game, it wasn't full strength. I also think that the Niners didn't run enough. 14 carries for Christian McCaffrey against a team that was dead last in like 4 major categories against 2 backs. I think that was the recipe for success. They ran it and had success. They just didn't run it enough. Debo had like 2 carries. He should have had like 5. JP Mason should have gotten some runs, and McCaffrey should have gotten about 7 more runs. I thought the Niners should have had a heavy run pass emphasis on the run, and they didn't. I thought that was a major loss. And then as far as one other thing, as far as on the Ravens on the defensive side, a lot of talk from the people that I've talked to around the team that the Niners really were going to try to make Arthur Millette the conflict defender and go at him. And what happened was they put Ronald Darby outside and dropped Humphrey inside. And now you had Marlon Humphrey with Geno Stone and Kyle Hamilton, 3 really good players in the middle of the field, all with great instincts. And you had Queen and Roquan with deep drops. So the windows were very, very small. And Humphrey did a nice job, and Stone did a nice job, and those linebackers did a nice job, and obviously Hamilton was monster until he went out.
And you know who I thought because you're right, Larry. I'm sorry for cutting in. Offensively, usually that's what we do. We find a mark and then we kill that area of the field, right? They're on their weakest link. And that's what Kyle schemes around. The weakest guys on their defense. And at first, you saw what they did when they bumped down. I'm not going to step on your take. They did. They bumped down Marlon Humphrey inside. But also, there was a safety that they kept playing around with in Marcus Williams. When Marcus Williams missed that tackle for George to go for 53 yards on the catch from Brock, Marcus Williams had a couple of missed tackles in the open space, but they stuck with him. They made him play man. They made Marcus Williams stay in that hole. That's the player that if the Niners were really going to have success, he was going to be the mark. Marcus Williams was going to be the guy. And the Ravens trusted him. And that's leaning more to what I was saying, where they were willing to sacrifice to keep their mantra of defense. They were not going to be dictated to. They played their style against us, and what was most important to them is that they kept their most physical guys near the line of scrimmage, and that's what they did to us.
Yeah, I do want to make note of the running thing, because I think that there was a lot of conversation throughout the week that I've seen that the 49ers should have ran the ball more. And I don't necessarily disagree with that fully, but there are some things that led to them not running the ball as much. When you look at half, I think it was a disparity of 16-12, 16 passes to 12 runs. Really, that disparity could have been 15-13. But on the second interception that Brock threw, and this changed the game a little bit too, where initially I thought, oh man, that's just a really good play by this secondary defender there, which it was. 21 made a hell of a play still. But Brock Purdy had the option to hand off or to hit the alert. And he chose not to hand off in that scenario and to throw the alert, and the interception happened. So that's one less run that really could have been, that was essentially called, that Brock decided not to run the ball on, and also threw an interception on that play. And so the 2 worst things that could happen were you didn't get the ball in Christian's hands and you threw an interception. Both of those take away from your chances to run in the first half a little bit too. So I think that has to be noted.